If music theory has ever felt restrictive, like a long list of rules you're trying constantly not to break, that's not because the music is restrictive. It's because you were taught the rules before you were shown how the music works. In Western tonal music, theory rules don't generate the music, they explain it. In theory classes, we often start with rules. Things like no parallel perfect intervals, resolve the leading tone, resolve sevenths, and so on. Those rules often feel like restrictions, but they're better understood as guardrails. They exist to make sure you're actually doing the things that good melody, counterpoint, and harmony already do in this style of music. So instead of starting with the guardrails, let's start with the musical behaviors they're protecting, and then work outward to the rules themselves. Let's start at the smallest level, melody. This sounds musical, not because it follows rules, but because it's singable. What makes something singable? Mostly stepwise motion, occasional leaps by small familiar intervals, all within a comfortable range, because not everybody is a virtuoso singer. So then what makes something not singable? Large leaps, dissonant intervals, or melodies pushing the limits of range. But we also crave variety. A melody that moves only by step gets boring pretty fast. So when we do leap, especially by larger intervals, there's a way to make that leap easier to process. You course correct afterwards by stepping back in the opposite direction. This musical behavior is where melodic rules come from. They're trying to prevent you from writing melodies that are difficult to sing and therefore less musical in this style. That leads to a few basic guidelines. Move mostly by step, third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, or octave. These are easy to sing. Avoid leaps by sixths, sevenths, augmented or diminished intervals, or anything greater than an octave. They're much harder to sing. And when you do leap, especially by something large or awkward, balance it with stepwise motion in the opposite direction. These rules don't create good melodies. They describe what good melodies already do. And to be clear, breaking these rules doesn't mean you're a bad musician or that your music will sound bad. It just means that your music is doing something outside the norm. If that choice is thoughtful, it can sound exciting or expressive. If it's accidental, it's often just less effective. That's it. These rules don't define good and bad music. Now, let's take multiple good melodies and let them happen at the same time. That's counterpoint. For counterpoint to work, the voices need to feel independent, like they're doing different things, distinct, each one needs a clear role, and yet they still need to sound like they mesh well and belong together. That balance is the whole challenge of counterpoint. So, what helps that happen? One of the most important tools is motion. When voices move in opposite directions, contrary motion, they immediately feel independent. When one voice moves and the other stays still, oblique motion, we also get clear separation. And sometimes the voices do move together, but mostly in imperfect consonances, thirds and sixths. Now, why thirds and sixths? They're consonant, so they sound stable and pleasant. But in a diatonic scale, some thirds and sixths are major and some are minor. So even when the voices move together, they're not moving through identical intervals every time. There's sameness, but also variety. Humans like that. All of these motions help the voices stay independent while still sounding like they're part of the same texture. So if that's what good counterpoint does, what gets in the way of that? Anything that blurs the distinction between voices. For example, voice crossing, when a lower voice goes above the higher one. Now we don't know who's who anymore. Parallel unisons or octaves, two voices doing literally the same thing. That's the opposite of independence. Parallel perfect fifths are a little trickier. Fifths aren't the same pitch like octaves or unisons, but acoustically, the upper voice reinforces the lower one. They blend together and sound very stable. The problem is that, unlike thirds and sixths, parallel fifths don't have built-in variety. They all sound equally strong and equally stable. But tonal music depends on motion between stability and instability. If everything is stable, then nothing is. All of these problems have the same root cause. They reduce independence. That's where the counterpoint rules come from. The rules like no voice crossing and no parallel unisons, octaves, or perfect fifths. Those are the big ones. But because these effects are so strong, we also avoid things that sound like them. For instance, voice overlap, when one voice moves past where another voice just was. It's not voice crossing, but it still confuses the ear. We avoid similar motion into perfect fifths or octaves in the outer voices when the soprano leaps. Even though it isn't technically parallel, it still sounds close enough. And two of the same perfect interval by contrary motion. This also may as well be parallel octaves. We can't fix parallels by jumping one voice an octave. That just creates the same problem in disguise. We also avoid something called unequal fifths, which is when the bass and another voice move from a diminished fifth up to a perfect fifth. These aren't parallel fifths because they're not both perfect, but it still sounds a lot like it. And there's one more important guardrail, not about motion, but about space. Keep adjacent upper voices within an octave of each other. Watch what happens when I move the upper voices up an octave. The harmony is exactly the same, the counterpoint is exactly the same, but there's this huge gap of unused space, and the voices stop feeling like they belong together. They start to sound like they're in separate worlds. Keeping the upper voices within an octave of their neighbors helps the texture stay connected. Now, we end up with this big list of counterpoint rules, which can feel overwhelming. And you can write good music that breaks them. But counterpoint isn't just about sounding good. It's about maintaining this illusion of multiple independent lines. If independence isn't the goal, like when you're strumming guitar chords, then these rules mostly don't apply. Now, let's zoom out even further from how lines interact to why the motion itself feels necessary. Harmony isn't just vertical stacks of notes or horizontal melodies happening at the same time. It's motion, specifically motion through controlled tension and release. Listen how some of these moments feel unsettled and others feel at rest. Now, what if I stop here? That doesn't feel finished. It doesn't just sound incomplete. It sounds like it's waiting. That's because some notes don't just create tension, they create expectations. Your ear isn't confused, it's predicting what should happen next. For example, the leading tone, scale degree 7, resolves up to the tonic, scale degree 1. When it doesn't resolve, it feels like a sentence that hasn't ended yet. And the sevenths of chords are dissonant. They create tension that wants to move, almost always by resolving down to the next note. We call leading tones and chordal sevenths tendency tones. When they behave the way we expect, the music feels settled. When they don't, the tension just hangs there. This isn't theory imposing rules on the music. It's noticing what sounds complete and what sounds unfinished. Because instability behaves this way, we end up describing it with rules of resolution. Leading tones resolve by stepping up to the tonic, and chordal sevenths resolve by stepping down. These aren't arbitrary instructions, they're descriptions of what releases tension. The music is already asking for these resolutions. Theory is just giving us language for that request. These rules exist because instability wants resolution, not because textbooks say so. Now, there's one more category of rules you'll encounter: doubling rules. Triads have 3 notes. 4-part harmony needs 4 voices, so one note has to be doubled. This F chord has 2 Fs, so the root is doubled. Textbooks give long lists. Usually double the root of major and minor triads, usually double the third of a diminished chord, always double the fifth of a second inversion chord. You can leave out the fifth of a root position chord, never double the leading tone, and never double the seventh of a chord. But again, these rules don't create good writing. They describe what good writing already tends to do. But all of those usuallys, they're not very helpful. If your music already follows good melodic and counterpoint practices, it'll naturally follow these vague doubling guidelines too. And as it turns out, a lot of these rules reinforce each other anyway. For instance, if we have a leading tone, it has to resolve up to the tonic. If we double it, then both voices would have to resolve up to the tonic. That creates parallel octaves, which are already forbidden. So again, these doubling rules are the ultimate guardrails. They're really not rules themselves, they prevent other mistakes. Now, here's the good news, the part that often gets lost. You don't have to micromanage every rule. Composers have already figured this out. I'm going to show you 4 voice leading strategies, musical hacks that naturally follow the rules. Strategy 1, parsimony. Parsimony just means moving each voice as little as possible from chord to chord. It's the path of least resistance. If 2 chords share a note, keep that note in the same voice. Move the remaining voices by step. This should be your default approach, especially when connecting root position chords, where the bass will leap from root to root and the upper voices move as little as possible. But it breaks down when 2 chords are a step apart. If everyone moves by step in the same direction, you get parallel everything, octaves and fifths. So what do? Strategy 2, contrary to bass. Move the upper voices in the opposite direction of the bass. Bass goes up, upper voices go down, and vice versa. Parallels disappear automatically, and there are no pairs of octaves or fifths in the upper voices to even worry about. This is a great strategy in lots of places, but particularly when the chords are a step away from each other. The contrary motion makes everything work. And speaking of contrary motion, strategy 3, voice exchange. Contrary motion is powerful, but sometimes hard to plan out. Voice exchange makes it work. 2 voices simply swap notes, F to A to F. You can even expand it, FGA against AGF. Clean, predictable, satisfying. But sometimes we do want the voices to move together. There's a way to do that too. Strategy 4, Foberdon. Parallel motion, but the right kind. This is an old technique. The name means false bass. It even predates most of the music we usually talk about. And most theory textbooks fail to mention how often it pops up in Baroque, classical, and even Romantic era music. We have thirds and sixths above the bass, which puts the upper voices a fourth apart from each other. No octaves, no fifths, no problem. So all 3 voices can move in parallel freely. And if there's a 4th voice, it either moves in contrary motion or leaps. Composers use these 4 strategies constantly. You should too. It worked for them, it'll work for your theory homework. Let's return to the phrase from the beginning. This music follows all the rules because it's using musical patterns. All 4 strategies are in play. Most voices move parsimoniously. These voices use phoberdon. These motions are all contrary to the bass. And here we have voice exchange, which is also contrary to bass by its nature. And at the end, the leading tone and the chordal seventh both resolve, making this feel like a complete thought. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Tonal harmony is modular. Use one strategy here, another there. You assemble a phrase and eventually a piece. So, if you're learning theory, remember, the rules aren't arbitrary commands. They're backwards descriptions of what good music already does. Focus on stepwise motion, parallel thirds and sixths, contrary and oblique motion, using common tones, and letting tendency tones, leading tones and chordal sevenths, go where they want. And instead of doing everything from scratch every time, look for places to use these 4 strategies. The rules will mostly take care of themselves. If you want to see how these ideas actually work in real music, start with episode 1 of my chord by chord series. Each episode takes a single chord connection and shows how the voices move, why the harmony behaves the way it does, and how the same patterns show up again and again across real music. If theory has ever felt like a checklist, this is where it starts to make musical sense.